In the early 1800s, we have something called the Second Great Awakening, and this was an awakening of religion. It was a religious movement, and people wanted to be a part of a religion, and so they started joining a lot of different churches. One church that occurs during this time, that is founded during this time by Joseph Smith, is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and it's also nicknamed the LDS Church and the Mormon Church. And a lot of people started converting to this because they believed what he claimed. He claimed that he saw God, and that he claimed that he also saw God's Son, Jesus Christ. And a lot of people started converting to this religion. When they started converting to this religion, they actually started to move together. They believed they wanted to be in this place called Zion, whatever they believed Zion to be, which was a place of peace. And they all wanted to live together. And so they started moving to wherever the base of the church was. So when they would convert to this religion, they would go to wherever this religion was. And when people started converting, non-Mormons, people who were not a part of this church, they started to think that they were a little bit strange. They didn't like what they were teaching. They didn't like what they believed in. And so they started harassing them, and they started persecuting them and doing all sorts of horrible things to them. They were burning their homes. They would burn their farms. They would tar and feather them, which was a tragic, horrible experience for everyone involved. The person who was tarred and feathered, they had hot tar poured all over their body, and then feathers put on them. And then the spouses and the children would have to go and take those feathers off, and they would rip them off, and it would rip the skin right off. And so it was a horrible experience for everyone involved. And these people who were doing this to them, they just didn't like what they believed in. They didn't like what they were preaching. And the Mormon people, their religious rights were not being protected. And so they were kicked out of a lot of different places. Kirtland, Ohio, and Independence, Missouri, and Nauvoo, Illinois. And especially in Missouri, something that the non-Mormons didn't like about them when they started coming in, because again, they started coming in a lot at a time, and they were converting. So if they were in Independence, Missouri, that means if you converted somewhere else, you would move to Independence. And in Missouri, a lot of people were coming in. They didn't like this religion. They found them to be very strange, very weird. And they also had something else that they didn't like about the Mormon people. The Mormon people, the majority of them, did not agree with slavery, and Missouri was a slave state. And so they agreed with slavery, they agreed with that lifestyle, they felt like it was important to them, whereas the LDS people, the majority of them, disagreed with it. Now, during that time, slavery was a huge issue, and it was a hot topic issue. People would get in fights over disagreements on this issue. They would kill each other, actually, over the disagreements on this issue. And so if slavery ever did come to a vote, and if it ever came to a vote, the Missourians obviously would vote for it to keep slavery, and the Mormons would vote against it. And the Mormons during this time would block vote. That means that they would vote all together. They would vote the same way. And so since there were so many people coming in because they traveled together in packs and they believed that Independence was their Zion, they would have overruled the Missourians if it ever came to a vote, which it never did. But the Missourians were worried about that. That was something they were concerned about. And so that's why, one of the reasons why they were persecuting them and hurting them. Now, that did not give them justification. That didn't give them reason to hurt these people, physically and emotionally hurt these people because of their religious beliefs. But that is one of the reasons why they did that. Now, the governor of Missouri is Governor Boggs, and he presented an extermination order. Now, exterminate means you're going to exterminate or get rid of whatever it is that you want to get rid of, right? If you hire an exterminator to get rid of the ants in your house, you expect that exterminator to kill all of those ants in your house. Well, Governor Boggs specifically ordered an extermination order on the Mormons. So if you stay in Missouri, we will kill you. And so the Mormons, obviously, they picked up and they moved. They left Missouri, they went to Nauvoo, Illinois. At this point in time, you have Joseph Smith, who is their leader and their prophet, who they believe to be their prophet, and he gets taken off to Liberty Jail with some people, and the rest of the Mormon people move into Nauvoo, Illinois. Now, they build up their beautiful city in Nauvoo. It becomes the biggest city in Illinois at the time. It's not the capital, but it is the biggest city because all of these Mormons are converging on Nauvoo because they all want to live together in peace. Now, Joseph Smith, after he gets out of jail, he comes to Nauvoo, and he becomes the mayor. So he is their religious leader, he's also their political leader. And they live in peace for about 5 years. They're doing really well. But then there are some people within the LDS Church that start to disagree with some of the things that Joseph Smith is doing, specifically practicing polygamy, which is having more than one wife at the same time. They disagree with that. They also think that he's getting too much power. And so they start to disagree with him, disagree with what he's doing with the church. And so they leave the church. They leave the LDS Church, but they don't quite leave the city. But they do leave the church, they just don't leave the area. And they start a newspaper, and it's called the Nauvoo Expositor. And this Nauvoo Expositor, they wanted to expose Joseph Smith, and they wanted to say all of the things that they disagreed with. So they wrote about all these things that they felt like he was doing, which he was living in polygamy, that is true. And then all these other things that he was doing that they didn't like. Joseph Smith claims that not all those things were true. You guys can go look that up for yourself and decide. But what happens after that is that Joseph Smith, since he's the mayor, and then he went with his city council, they decide that it is in the best interest of the LDS people and their community that they don't want fighting to happen. And they don't want the people who left the church, who were running the Nauvoo Expositor, and then the LDS people, the Mormons, to get into riots or fights. And so they decide that it is up to them to stop that. So they go into the building where the Nauvoo Expositor is located, and they break the printing press. They throw it out into the street, they break it, and they burn all the newspapers, which it's private property, can't really do that. But they felt, because the safety issue, they felt like they could. Now, at that point, Joseph Smith gets taken to jail again, and he gets taken to Carthage jail, and he has his brother Hiram that goes with him. He also has Willard Richards, his friend, and also John Taylor as well. Those 4 men end up in Carthage jail. Carthage jail is not a jail that we would normally think of as a jail. It's actually a 2-story house, and the jailer and his wife live there. And the jailer, his job is to keep his prisoners safe until they can get them to their trial, into their court case. And in this building, it's a house. So on the bottom floor, you have your kitchen and dining room table. You have your sitting room. Upstairs, you have 2 bedrooms. One of the bedrooms was turned into a jail cell. So when you walk in, there are bars going from ceiling to floor in a section of the room, and that's where they were. Now, the jailer hears that there are rumors that Joseph Smith is going to be killed by a mob, because the mobs are coming for them. The mobs had moved them out of all these different places. They are the ones who had been harassing them, and now more mobs of people are going to come and kill these men in his jail. So he goes up to the men upstairs and he says, there's a mob that's going to come and kill you. So instead of having you sitting in here behind these bars, I'm going to move you to the other bedroom. The other bedroom was just a normal bedroom. So if they get through the jailer, myself, so the jailer and his wife, he says, so if they get through myself and my wife, you can try to have a fighting chance, so you won't be stuck behind the bars. So they move them over to the other room. The mob gets there, gets through the jailer and his wife, and they go up the stairs and they try to get through the door. Hiram Smith, Joseph Smith's brother, is at the door, and he's up against the door trying to keep them out, and then somebody shoots through the door and hits him in the face, and he dies, and he is down. Then you have John Taylor, Willard Richards. People are coming into the room. They're shooting through the room. They're coming into the room. They both get shot. They both survive, though, as well. Joseph Smith is by the window. There are people on the ground shooting up through the window from the outside and then shooting. So he's kind of in a crossfire, and he gets shot, and he falls out the window, and he dies. Now, after he dies, the mobs move into Nauvoo and start burning Nauvoo as well. And they finally come to an agreement that the LDS people will move west. The person who steps up to become the leader of the LDS Church is Brigham Young. And Brigham Young, his new task is to get all of his people west. In fact, Joseph Smith and Brigham Young both planned on going west. Joseph's plan was to come west with his people because the Western territories were actually owned by Mexico. They were not owned by the United States. And so they wanted to leave the United States altogether because their religious rights were not being protected. But Joseph died before that happened. So Brigham Young, he takes his people, takes a few years, but he's able to get them into the Utah Territory. And that is why the Mormons moved west, is because of all of the persecution. They were trying to get out of the United States, and they kind of just upped their timeline after Joseph Smith was killed. So that is why they moved west, and they get here. The first advance company gets here in 1847 on July 24th. The last part of the advance company arrives in the Salt Lake Valley, and that is why we celebrate Pioneer Day. That's why we celebrate July 24th. Every summer, and all over Utah we have fireworks going on and we have parades going on, is because that is our state's day, is when the people who settled Utah, the first group, got here on July 24th, 1847. But that is why we came here. That's why people came here. That's why we have this area that's been settled, is because of all the persecution of these people. And actually, when they got to Utah, they were right back in the United States, just because of the fact that the United States and Mexico had gone to war with each other, and the United States won. In 1846 they won, and part of the spoils was the California Territory and New Mexico Territory and Utah Territory, and so they were actually right back in the United States, even though they wanted to leave the United States. But the United States won the Utah Territory after the Mexican War. So, but that is why the Mormons moved west, is because of all the persecution. They were trying to get away from it, to live in peace and purity, and what they believed, again, to be Zion.